Hi, I'm Eddie Donmez, and today I'm joined with Marcus Paleti, the CEO of Laureti Group. Okay, Marcus, great to have this chat. It's an super exciting day for you. But as we start this interview, can we just start with who you are and who Laureti Group is?
My name is Marcus Paleti. I'm the founder of a global business called Laureti that is strongly positioned to own the passenger experience economy. And we started this company back in 2017 as a Navy startup. But then when we focused on the real problems in mobility, how this will unfold going towards electric vehicle, ultimately naturally to autonomous technologies, we found out that passenger experience is going to be the most important problem to solve.
Great stuff. And I think what would be useful for the audience is for you to kind of outline what the passenger experience looks like today, right? How does that look through your eyes? What are the issues with it? And most importantly, what's the big opportunity of how this this kind of passenger-centric mobility kind of sphere can move forward?
So the passenger experience economy itself is evolving to be a $1 trillion market. When we first started as an EV company, a few months down the line, there was a soul-searching moment for me to look at, do we want to be, what's so special about Laureti that except for wanting to have a slice of this exciting market? Then really, when we had, there was an occasion where we had to make several trips to visit suppliers and auto companies, etc., from all over the world. Every time we made those trips, our team, by the time we got to the destination, we were extremely fatigued and achieved less than what we prepared for. And that's something. I mean, there were occasions where we also missed appointments because of travel delays and stuff. So when I got back, it was really, it wasn't apparent at the time. It wasn't too obvious at the time, but this is something I was doing some research on. The more I realized how deep the problem was in terms of corporate travel, there's this particular insight that actually quite pivotal in the decision to solve this problem was, let's say if you had a 5 to 6 hour flight, and after that you had a car journey, the longer the car journey, the more exhaust the trip will be. It's the biggest contributor for travel fatigue. As soon as that was related to cars, the vision was clear. Up until that point, I was on the fence line to see whether this is the problem we wanted to solve, but then it became clear that the passenger experience is something that we wanted to tackle. If the future is going to be naturally moving towards autonomous technologies, what is the most important commodity? The time that you spend in the car.
And for the audience listening to this, it can be useful to visualize that kind of passenger-centric travel experience. So from picking up my phone right now and wanting to go to Frankfurt or San Francisco, can you just outline step by step of what that actually could look like, if you're successful, or where this is inevitably moving?
Sure. So the end-to-end travel experience, what many people call it, it won't be possible without a software and hardware combination. Right. Apple is a great example for that. I'll come to that. Well, I'll come to that in a minute. Just to touch upon your question on picking up your phone and ordering something is there's a one-way interaction. So it's always a one-way relationship to mobility. But imagine, let's take a scenario where you're traveling as a corporate traveler. You're traveling to 3 different destinations, and your itinerary is packed with, it's compact and demanding. And imagine now what Laureti can offer is, one, it understands the travel needs. Second, it triangulates with the where you headed and the purpose of your journey, and knowing all of this at every single leg of your journey or every single mode of transportation, understanding the needs of your travel and accommodating you according to that, basically gives back the richness of time during your travel. That's the main element. The second element is basically getting to the destination more energized than being fatigued and tired and all of that. So in order to do this, you have to have both software and hardware working with each other to enable that experience. So imagine if you don't have to carry a laptop when you get in a car or business airline or even trains or coaches. Imagine that you don't have to pick up your phone every time you need to book a taxi internationally. Once your itinerary is already established, the system confirms and adjusts accordingly to accommodate the entire end-to-end trip, instead of causing any disruptions or having to create that hassle to take on from trip to trip.
And to be perfectly clear, what is Laureti Group actually selling? Is it the hardware? Is it the software? Is it electric vehicles?
It's the entire ecosystem. The ecosystem has software, hardware, and service element to it. Hardware, everything that comes in contact with the user. In this case, user is the occupant of the car. The software is the element that enables both the in-cabin experience, also the beyond the vehicle door guidance as well, assistance as well. And then the service element is to take away the ownership burden from the end user, and creating that as a business opportunity for fleet companies. When I say fleet companies, these are transport companies like it can be ride-hailing or even corporate transport providers as well, like Addison Lee. And imagine for you to access this level of convenience and comfort and a great level of passenger experience, you first have to buy a car in normal setting, like Rolls-Royce or Maybach or S-Class. Even that, it's very limited to the comfort part of it, but not really doing anything to do with your time inside the car. But in our case, you don't have to buy the car. You just have to be a member in the Laureti ecosystem. And then it's portable as well. It's not in just one city, it's global. So any company, any fleet operator that uses Laureti vehicles will automatically have users who have access to the entire ecosystem.
Right, so you kind of touched upon it a little bit there, but can you speak to what is the Mira operating system and kind of paint the picture of what that looks like?
Mira is our core software. Sorry. Mira is our core technology, which is an operating system that sits across multiple vehicles. It's a centralized AI-powered operating system that enables passenger experience. Think about it this way. So in a typical airline, you have two different operating systems that in a flight. So one that sits at the cockpit, responsible for all the traffic management and communication with other flight systems and etc. And then you have one that sits at the passenger seat. At the passenger seat, responsible for entertainment, in-flight information, to all sorts of cabin connectivity, etc. So Laureti follows a similar framework where you have, it doesn't matter which car you get into, which Laureti-powered car you get into. So if you're working on a presentation in let's say, in a London taxi powered with Laureti technology, Mira technology, and then you switch to someplace in New York, and you can pick up this last screen that you've been working on. So it's all centrally connected through it's a cloud-based technology, and of course it's powered by AI.
It's really interesting. And can you just paint the picture as well about the global business travel market in terms of what that market is valued at today? There's also the ride-hailing kind of market as well. What's the opportunity? What's the addressable market there? And how does that relate to you in terms of what kind of share you're trying to take?
Sure. So there is an element of electric vehicle in our part. It's more like, we're still selling the vehicle, although we're not manufacturing it, because this is something we produce with our own design with the auto OEMs. However, 85% of the vehicle is not ours; it's theirs. So we're building everything in. So when it comes to the business travel side of it, that's part of our market size consideration, but it's not the entire bit. But just particularly looking at the business travel itself, especially corporate travel market, the corporate travel market is growing, especially post-COVID situation. People want to see value in every trip they make outside of their home. Especially corporations they're not price sensitive, but they demand more value in each trip. So we do that, and even small businesses. I mean, even for us, unless there's absolutely necessary, we don't we're living in a time where the attitude is you go to meetings when it's absolutely necessary. It's slightly different to pre-COVID situation. So the passenger experience market itself is a $1 trillion market, but the factors that contribute to that is not just in the EV market. So we had to take a blended approach. So putting the passenger at the center of everything, putting the travel experience at the center of everything. By doing that, it's not just the electric vehicle space, but we're also looking at the on-demand and ride-hailing market. We had to consider the trends and the growth, CAGRs of year-on-year CAGRs. But we're also looking at things like corporate travel market, where for example, you have a certain companies now that promote all-inclusive services. For example, these are new business models that are proposing flight plus train and etc. So all of that include end-to-end inclusive trips with a single bill. I mean that is an emerging business model as well. So we had to take all these considerations to scope out what contributes to this $1 trillion market. So.
Right, and zooming out, just in terms of the future of mobility, can you speak to some of the themes behind this acceleration? So I'm talking about car ownership. You live in London, you don't need a car. You think, okay, do I really want to pay for a car and parking and insurance and road tax? The move towards driverless cities, climate change, EVs, having more productive commutes. Can you speak to some of those themes and why this is really, making everyone get a move on in terms of moving the market, let's say inflection points towards 2027 and 2028?
If you go back to 1970s or 80s, even 90s, the car trend. So even to this day, we're used to seeing, having cars in your business is an asset, or the American dream, if you look at it. So having a car is seen as an asset, but today it's a liability. So you're paying money essentially for your car to sit at the sit and wait in the parking garage.
I read a great stat: 96%.
The utilization rate is only 96%, and rest of the time it's just idle and you're paying bills, right? So, but when you look at the 2026-2027 inflection point, you're looking at all across the world, in mostly urban cities across, mostly cities across the UK, EU, North America, and also parts of South Asia, private ownership of cars is slightly declining. It's constantly declining. It's been in decline for the last few years. But by the end of this decade, private ownership of cars will be eclipsed by on-demand mobility. That means people are more used to having on-demand services now, and that's only going to be increasing, especially with Gen Z and the next generations. They're not in the attitude of owning a car anymore. They all make smart choices, and especially when you look at the entrepreneurial culture across the world, what that means is that we are time sensitive and productivity driven era at the moment. So if mobility is killing time for you in your day-to-day business, and that's actually a negative thing. On top of that, 26-27 is also a time when we expect to see the next level of autonomous technologies as well. At least the predictions are. We can argue about the timelines, but at least that AI and autonomous technologies are kicking in, advancing so much that this is actually changing how we interact with cars and other parts of, it's not just in the auto industry, but also how it's influencing other modes of transport as well. So 26-27 is a key inflection point, because all these different areas are combined together, converging together to creating this massive opportunity. When that time, we will be in that era to, I think most people will ask that question, if you're not going to drive a car anymore, what would you do in it? And I think at that point we'll have the answer. So Laureti has been already doing this, where the most important commodity in the car is not the driver and how he drives at the speed, but it's actually the time of the passenger. how you optimize that for the user.
And it's not just cars, right? It's so just picking out a headline: France banned short-haul flights. Obviously that's going to lead to business passengers having to drive, but also get trains, right, and other forms of transport. So could you just talk to, we've spoken quite a bit about cars. Can you speak to to trains and how they're going to have to change for this kind of business, but also personal travel as well, and what that experience is going to look like?
Sure. Sustainability being the most important factor for, a driver for corporate decisions nowadays. France has banned the short-haul flights, mainly for sustainability reasons. But then you have corporate travel as well. That's it has to show its travel habits and sustainability practices. And now, if you were to spend more time in trains and avoid flights, that means the time that's spent in trains for extra hours needs to be justified. Would you rather have your valued employees turn up to work, or have a write-off days, or give them an opportunity to make the most of their train journeys and be productive, etc.? So it's not just France, but there are other countries that are seriously, in European countries that are looking at a similar model. I think eventually we will see a lot of countries, a lot of neighboring countries following the same suit. But in that sense, what we will see, there will be a lot of demand for train travel, especially corporates to adopt that sort of travel practices. Now, it all comes down to where the value is going to be for them. Is it in a train journey that having more comfort, or basically maximizing the time that they spend inside?
And with all this kind of interconnected transport data, you're talking AI, ML, the Mira operating system, interacting with your calendar, interacting with your car and everything, and your entertainment system and everything in between. What are some of the challenges around all of this kind of digitalized mobility? What are the considerations? I'm thinking data privacy and security. Can you speak to some of the challenges there?
The first one would be complexity. Complexity in basically how do you combine all of this? The answer to that is you have a system, you have a global ecosystem, a single platform where all these technologies that are already out there will be repurposed to sit on a single platform. That's both a challenging factor, but there's a solution as well. The second bit is how to protect, especially if you're targeting the business class, if you're targeting the corporate clients. Privacy is, as you mentioned, is going to be the biggest factor. So what Mira does, we looked at how mobility itself being digitized, and it's going to be increasingly digitized as we go forward. What we're not thinking about today is the privacy and digital security factor. And I don't think I don't know, at this point, companies don't know what their role is in this. Automotive companies, it's not their role. Okay, we are hardware people, nothing to do with the software companies. Well, nobody's asking us to do it. So it's sort of, there's no accountability on this. Nobody's thinking about it for obvious reasons. But we looked at it and said, well, ultimately, for example, 10 years ago, all we cared about having social media accounts and, email accounts without giving much thought to our data, how our data is going to be used, or digital privacy, etc. Today, we are well aware of all these implications, and we're seeing, all this drama of Senate hearings and, data issues, etc. But then the risk sat at the computer or your device, or your computer device. And maybe the risk was compromising your credentials. But tomorrow, the risk profile is slightly different. It's every single move that you make outside your home if you don't address it today. So, and then you combine that with AI. So let's say if I know your travel habits and I combine AI to understand where will you be in 3 months' time, what your travel patterns are, what's the likelihood of you being at a certain place at a certain point. How easy is that to predict? And we know that these things work. You know that you can using the very basic fundamental data today, you can actually make these simulations, and there's a safety factor, whether it's for corporates or personal families, um, families that personal use families, or even governments. There's a huge safety factor to it. But then also, when you use this sensitive information about, when an executive travels from place to place, especially when you need privacy, for those meetings, etc., and how easy it is for you to corporate espionage is a thing, right? So thinking about all these issues for us, we are creating a platform that guarantees 100% digital freedom when you interact with Mira. So this can be adapted or installed. It doesn't matter what car and what mode of transport. So that's where we're looking at solving this problem, helping people to get away from the surveillance and actually enjoy that digital freedom they get in a single platform.
So Marcus, you're definitely a bit of a futurist. Could you highlight some examples of platforms or tech companies that you really draw inspiration from in terms of disrupting or interrupting that status quo?
So I'm an outsider. We from day one, the reason why Laureti is what it is today is because we employed outside the car thinking. I would printer manufacturing business is one, and Nokia and Apple. It's these are some paradoxical experiences we saw in our lifetime. So these are some inspirations. For example, I saw since 2015 or so, we all now used to signing digitally, and we only many people talk about the convenience, but the other factor is the sustainability part of it. If you're in 2010, 2012, if you're in a printer manufacturing business, your competitors will be thinking how to make faster printers, better printers, and more portable printers, right? But somebody thought about it outside the printing business and solved this problem using a software. And today, if you go on DocuSign, for example, you can see how many trees are being saved in real time. So there's a sustainability factor to it. But you can see, I'm a big believer that you don't have to follow the same. Sometimes thinking outside thinking outside the box or the industry, outside of normal practices, and it's pretty obvious to, it may not be instantly obvious, but you can solve problems in an unconventional way. But again, that's where the innovation thing comes in. The next one is Apple. Apple gave us the Apple thought is big enough for not only us, but and yet a lot of companies can still apply this bit. So what we borrowed from Apple is that how they looked at the asset light. They graded their designs, they graded innovation, they designed products and engineered products, and they outsourced manufacturing. Also, they didn't just look at the manufacturing telephones, but they actually worked on the software, used software and digital products to create what it is today, a great brand and something that we can find value in every minute of our lives. And it became intertwined with our lives. We don't conduct our lives without a smartphone today, thanks to Apple for that. The same thing we applied in our business model as well. How to give back the richness of time to people during their journeys. So then it comes down to, okay, this can't be solved with simply making another electric vehicle or putting a software into it, but it's a combination. They all have to work hand in hand to create an ecosystem great enough that people find value in every single minute of their journey. So these are some inspirations that we employed.
So can we get to the bottom of what does Laureti actually offer? What are people buying? What are your products?
In our business, we have a user base and a customer base. Customer base is people who buy our vehicles. They're not Laureti powered vehicles in this case. That's mostly the fleet customers. Sorry, the customer base would be transport companies, fleet companies, such as either ride-hailing drivers or companies like transport operators such as Edison Lee, Executive Fleet, Black Lane or Wheelie, likes of these. And also we have a B2C element, which is mostly focused on chauffeur-driven cultures in the Middle East and South Asia, where we already know that if you have a car, if you buy a car 60 to 70 grand plus, and you have a driver with it automatically. So these are targeted. But the user bases are anyone that want to access this ecosystem. So an average corporate traveler who wants to have more productivity factor, the user base would be an average corporate traveler who wants to have more to their mobility needs, to get more of their mobility needs would be our customers. Simply, they can join the ecosystem, see what is available, which Laureti vehicle is available across different platforms, whether it's Uber or Edison Lee or whoever, and then they can access the nearest one. So it's not just, we're not, to be very clear, we're not a ride-hailing company. It's just people are subscribing to the ecosystem, no matter where they get these vehicles from.
But you do produce vehicles. And as soon as I kind of hear that, I think manufacturing challenges, margins, like we've seen Tesla, obviously defy gravity almost and come up with, an amazing manufacturing process, but many have failed. How are you going to produce these cars at volume? You must be thinking, okay, we've got a big job on our hands here.
Laureti is a model that delivers cars without going through the manufacturing process. So it's not outsourcing. It's basically buying 85% of the content that's already there with established OEMs. So we partner with them where we have 15% of our vehicle content is proprietary. The arrangement is based on the design that they will produce with their supply chain, or we recommend the supply chain, which they install in their factories and deliver to the customers and power them with our technology. So in terms of the entire design inside the vehicle, the core software technology and all the digital bit is ours. And then what really makes a difference here is that we don't have to get into expensive engineering programs. Let's say, for example, we have to deliver 10,000 vehicles in the US. We might partner with someone like Ford or any of the US-based companies, or someone in the UK or EU, maybe the local factories, local OEMs you can partner with. So the whole point of partnership for us is not to buy the vehicle and redo that. That's a coach building exercise. But it's actually set up the shop inside their factories. These variants will come out straight from the factory and deliver to the customers with the warranties that they provided. So this is where we are a totally de-risked and asset-light business model, rather than creating the entire bit from clean sheet of paper. Is an expensive, more and also a risky part of the business, which we don't want to touch upon. And this is where we also go back to the inspiration from Apple as well. What they really focus on is the experience. And in our case, we're putting passenger at the center of it. Everything that comes in, everything that adds value to our user, to that extent, we also looking at the manufacturing process to create or to deliver that value.
So to be perfectly clear, when is the first vehicle coming? How many have you if so, how many have you produced already? When can people see these vehicles?
So we're in the process of actually putting out 2 vehicles. One is a full-fledged experience in a London taxi that will run as a pilot for the first 6 months. People, especially corporations, get to experience this within 6 months' timeline after the funding is complete. The flagship vehicle, of course, will be ready in 16 weeks post-funding. So as you know, that we are in the middle of launching on Flow. So once we have the closing date, from that point on, we're looking at a few months before we put out these vehicles. And instead of calling it vehicles, you can experience the entire ecosystem in our brand experience showroom, which we'll make an announcement very soon about.
Very exciting. And just in terms of the actual design of these vehicles as well, I know you've kind of had some important inputs looking at the demographics of who actually is in cars nowadays. I mean, back in 1900s, let's say, or when cars were first, created, it was mainly men, driving these cars. But you've taken a different approach by looking at the demographics. Obviously, at least 50% are women. So can you talk to some of the additional safety kind of features and requirements you've integrated into this?
Whatever we worked on with the women's safety, with safety features, especially focused on women, it wouldn't have been a product if you only focused on the driver perspective. So when you switch the paradigm to passenger, all of a sudden, all these things are possible. Let me just go into the Mira technology, where the safety factor, right? It's a patent pending technology where it takes in various parameters, such as, let's say, if you're traveling if a corporate executive, a female executive traveling from here to maybe another continent for the first time in a different city, the technology takes different parameters into account, such as basic personal data. And on top of that, the details that we got from the itinerary. For example, if you're taking a fleet, if you're taking a car after your business meeting, so time to destination, any unusual stops, route mapping, and any sudden movements in the car. These are some parameters that will take into account and create an alert system. So this particular technology itself creates an alert system that brings the transport operators into accountability, where it sends the fleet alert for any incident, and they have to log in what they've done about it. So what action they take about that particular event. When there's no response or something like that, automatically the system activates the emergency services to call for help.
Can you give me some predictions or projections, if you like, for what does the future of this passenger-centric mobility world look like? Maybe in the short term, the medium term, to long term. Are we going to be in flying taxis, by 2050, ordering our supermarket shopping on the train, to be delivered when we get to the station? What does this look like in the short to medium to long term?
In my mind, it's only mid-term, but I don't know how long is the long term. But one thing we can all agree on is the autonomous future is inevitable. It's likely. We don't know if it's in 5 years or 10 years or even by the end of this decade. But we're already in level 3. So we go to level 4, and that might last for another 10, 15 years or even less before we get to level 5, fully autonomous cars. And in all this transition, that I think the evolving question for us is, if you don't have to drive a car, what would you do in it? That's the first bit. The second thing, the paradigm also changes. In the last 100 years, cars have always been about the driver. But the next 100, you will know, it'll be about the passenger. It'll be about how you spend the time in the car. The old paradigm is about how fast the car can go and the driving experience and etc. So, the infrastructure is changing as well. On a 20-mile road, 20-mile limit road or 30-mile limit road, especially talking about the urban areas, why would you want to own a car? Why would you want to own a sports car where you can't even give a full ride for the experience and the product? So looking at it from the passenger perspective, a lot of things will change because all of a sudden you're bringing the experience element to it, like productivity element to it, like the wellness element to it. The car is now another living space for you. Before it was a device that moves people from place to place. But tomorrow it's about how to make the entire experience work for people. So when you put that into equation, where you're not just looking at the metal frames and architectures of a vehicle, but you're looking at how we conduct our day-to-day operations, it becomes part of a lifestyle, how to live smart enough, or choosing more smarter options.
And if we kind of zoom out from just the kind of passenger experience, what other benefits would you say for, let's say, the economy, the way we work and live, could there be from this? And what I mean by that is, let's say car parks, if 96% utilization rates, people aren't driving, they're just sat there, what can we do with that land if there's no cars or pollution in the city centres? And it frees up, more space for passengers, emissions. Could you speak to some of these kind of positive externalities?
Yeah, I mean, sustainability is a huge factor there. The role of the electric vehicle is to address the emissions on the road, but we don't simply, the emission issues remain the same, how it's produced throughout the value chain and the model of the, and the lifetime of the vehicle as well. So we don't really have big savings on that front. But maybe the answer isn't in looking at just like the printer analogy I gave you. If you increase the utilization of the asset, which is the vehicle, the volumes will automatically come down. So, for example, in the printer's case, you're signing documents online, you're scanning, you don't need to scan, you don't need to buy the hardware. Automatically, the hardware requirement went down, for example, the printers, the home printers, for example. If you focused on-demand / passenger-centric experience, where a fleet business need a car to do 50 jobs a day, by proper allocation, it'll be doing 100 jobs a day. So that means the need for volumes will go lower and the utilization rate will go higher. If you need less cars, obviously, you don't need that many factories. Of course, it's reducing the volumes, therefore, the production emissions will go lower. When you have less cars on the street, of course, you have a lot of real estate to work with, real estate or even sustainability portion of it. But then, interesting factor is when you look at the cost per portion of a car factory, you're probably paying $15 per the real estate that's used to produce a car, and $150 for the labor, maybe $1,500 for the logistics. Logistics play a big part in both the economical side of it, but also on the emission side of it as well, because you're moving parts from continent to continent, or sometimes inbound logistics, that'll cost you even higher in terms of emissions. So if you're making where you sell, then the need for moving logistics automatically cuts down the emissions as well. And then that proper allocation of vehicle plays a huge part. So using the software bit, if you know, for example, I'll take Mira as an example. If I know in advance where the vehicle will be placed in a few months, a few weeks, a few days, it is more accurate to do the jobs, to deliver the jobs according to the itineraries that are already there, instead of waiting for the jobs to come through. As you know, probably, in London, for example, if you consider black cab business, for every 4 miles of paid ride, you have to burn 6 miles of rubber on the streets. So when you allocate properly like that, think about all the emissions that you save on the roads as well. So it's not just the transport emissions. You also have to consider the production emissions and also logistics emissions and also the on-road proper allocation emissions as well. So and the benefits will be massive.
If I'm not a business passenger, right, it's, for a lot of executives and, they have important trips, all over the world. If I'm like an everyday person, consumer that uses Uber to order their taxis and get around, or, I'm buying a Tesla, how will the passenger-centric kind of world work for me as well as that business passenger?
When we refer to business user, we're also mindful of regular folk, because all in all, we live in a generation where productivity is a biggest commodity, in our work lives. So this is for everybody that values their time. We're not trying to create another status symbol. We're trying to make any vehicle a smartest device that can actually give back time rather than taking away from it.
Perfect. And thank you for this conversation. I look forward to watching the journey.
Thank you.